going live, Africans United, Know Thyself, Black Power Radio on Oak 93.5. Each and every Sunday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., where we discuss solutions to black communities, local and globally. With Brother Essence Divine, Dr. Kimberly Maturian, and Brother Asar Amen. With special guests every week, you can follow Africans United, Know Thyself, Black Power Radio on Facebook.com/Oak 93.5. Or you can engage in conversation by calling 919-899-9305. Once again, each and every Sunday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. right here on Oak 93.5.
Peace to the elders, the ancestral giants. Peace to gods and goddesses past, present, and future. Peace to kings, queens, and royal families all over. And peace to you, brothers and sisters. You tune into Oak 93.5, Africans United, Know Thyself, Black Power Radio. Today is important because we're talking about money and mindset. It's not just about who has money and who doesn't. It's about what money has meant in our homes, what it cost us, and how some of the habits we call normal may actually be survival strategies that no longer help us. We're going to talk honestly about being broke and being poor because they are not the same thing. We have the Honorable Brother Asar Amen.
Anaka Saw, a BB for Hodier, African liberation, black liberation, African power, black power, for every black man, woman, and child on the planet. We are the original people. I am the original man. I am a son of Africa. Peace to the listening audience.
We have the Queen, Dr. Kimberly Maturian.
Good morning, listening audience. I am glad to be back in the house. Thank you all for your prayers and for remembering my family and the global initiatives of stopping the violence that happens in our community from the root. So thank you again, and I look forward to having this great discussion on what it means to not be broken in the midst of economic systems.
I'm Essence Divine, and to help us unpack this conversation, we're joined by a brother who has spent years helping people rethink their relationship with money, build smarter habits, and create a better financial foundation for themselves. He's the author of The Financial Reset After 40 and Smart Money Moves, A Teen's Guide to Financial Literacy. With more than 25 years of experience in corporate supply chain and operations leadership, he's also the founder of DSB Solutions and the creator of the Coach DB42 Financial Literacy Platform, Brother Dwayne Bobbitt.
Greetings and thank you, Honorable host, for allowing me to come back and continue to help unpack this this issue that's plaguing our community. So I'm looking forward to having the conversation and really being able to talk about it, which is always the first way to solve a problem is to identify it and then to have discussions, and then also to create platforms where we can have these open, honest discussions and not just hope or pray or wish they go away, but there has to be action, there has to be solution-based thoughts, and how do we move forward with this issue?
And the topic is poor versus broke, the money mindset conversation we're finally ready to have. And the core distinction between broke is a bank account and poor is a mindset. Broke is temporary, it's a number, its numbers change. And poor is your relationship with money that follows you no matter how much it comes in. You can be broke on the way up, you can be rich and still poor. The goal isn't just more money, it's a different relationship with it. So before we get into personal habits, I want to start with the bigger picture. How has history of exclusion, redlining, predatory lending, and block access to ownership shaped the way black families relate to money today?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So, we just got through celebrating Veterans Day earlier, last week and stuff. And, it's a great patriotic thing that people really lean into. most people celebrate and don't understand or don't even know that it was
Memorial
founded
Day.
Memorial Day, that it was founded by African Americans as well.
Yes.
You know, and so this is an example of where our people have gone and fought in wars to protect this country, to keep people safe, and yet when they come home, they still face these same challenges and issues through redlining, not being able to buy affordable housing, being excluded from the GI Bill and stuff. And so it's not that they didn't have the wherewithal or the how to. It's just that the system was set up to block them and make it, they have to go through multiple hoops just to get the things that the rest of society was able to just readily available and to tap into. And when you look at this, and you look at when the wars were, you know, in the early 40s and 30s and stuff, and like these are generations of our grandfathers and our great grandfathers and stuff. And so that's where a lot of the wealth today was passed down from, because one of the keys to building generational wealth is to be able to pass something on. And so if you look at what the house prices were when they started buying these homes after the Vietnam War, after World War II, the Korean War, and then how those values have grown over the decades and stuff. And then when those people pass away, they're able to pass those assets on that have grown thousands of percents over the years. So you may buy a house for, you know, $40,000-$50,000 in the early 60s, and those houses can be worth $800,000, $900,000 to $1 million these days and stuff. And so that's part of the system. That's part of the ways of generating wealth that we have been left out of. And yeah, there's a lot of us that have been able to overcome that and stuff, but there's still so many people who have been left behind because they weren't able to participate in that. Even the veterans today, the veterans who've come back from, you know, Desert Storm and the wars in the Middle East and stuff. And, you know, a lot of times you see the people on the streets and stuff, and you see these veterans, but they have a hard time even collecting the benefits that are owed to them for the service that they have provided and stuff. And so we have to figure out a way of how to combat these things, how to get, you know, proper representation so that people can get what's owed to them.
And for the financial illiterate out there, myself, what's redlining?
So redlining is where, you know, we've always been talking about, you know, you got to vote, you got to vote, you got to have your voice. And so people have tried to vote, but what redlining is they kind of stack the deck against certain communities. They make it harder for you to have access to voting places where you can readily go to them quickly and stuff. You know, living in Seattle, we were always able to vote by mail. It was not an issue. Here, you know, you got to go stand in line 4 or 5 hours at a time. You know, they have where you can't get water and stuff. And so they just make it more challenging for you. And then they reshape the districts based on where people live. And so that's a form of redlining and stuff. And it's just a way to make it harder for people of color and minorities to vote and be a part of the system.
Can I also add to that, Brother Dwayne? One of the tactics of redlining is when they use the banks to block loans to certain, of course, people of color in certain districts or certain land frames, so that we were forced to only be able to buy in certain neighborhoods. So that's a lot of times how the suburbs were sort of isolated to white people, because they wouldn't even give us loans from the banks to do it. And so when Brother Dwayne talks about the GI Bill, sometimes it's not even a matter of you having the means to do it. It's about having the opportunities to buy. So those who had financial security were not even allowed to get the loan. So redlining would also, and they specifically made sure they saw you coming and you were not allowed. And I think later on, like in the 80s, you would hear different ones play the game where they would have like a dummy set up. We got a little smart to the game where blacks would have a white person purchase for them, because as soon as they heard it was a black person trying to purchase, they would automatically block them. So, redlining was definitely a systematic approach to denying us claims to wealth.
Right. Okay. And I'm guessing.
Can I add on? Redlining is basically just another form of oppression to the advancement of our brothers and sisters in our community, making it harder for us. And that's why, I really appreciate this conversation.
Yes.
And Dwayne, coming here to share with us, tips on how we can deal, with these situations, because it's still taking place today as far as trying to block access. So what we have to do, and that's what Dwayne's here to help us with, is use our intelligence so that we can basically make progress when it comes to our economic development.
Right. So that brings me to predatory lending then, because the way it read predatory lending, it's like they where they preying on. Just break that down.
So the people who have the least pay the most interest rates.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Whether you're getting a car, you get 15-20% interest rate. Like, that's crazy. Whether you're getting a payday loan, they charge you astronomical fees just for that, just to have access to your money. And so they've created a system to continue to exploit.
That's right.
The people who don't have, and these are in our neighborhoods, and these are in our communities and stuff, and they're convenient and stuff. And at the time, like, you got to do what you got to do. Like, you got to be able to cash your check. If you don't have a bank account, they won't allow you to cash your check at a bank or whatever. So you go to these types of places, payday loans and stuff like that, if you need money a little bit quicker, and then they'll take part of your paycheck when it gets here and stuff. So, and it's just a matter of being cognizant of all these things and having programs where we can educate our people and we can help people get set up with bank accounts. And, especially here in Raleigh and in North Carolina, understanding like we have one of the first African-American owned banks in the nation.
Right.
And then still not to have a good relationship with them, and still not to be, have readily available programs to the people and stuff. And so it's kind of like, how do we break down these walls? How do we partner more with these types of banks? There's a new bank that started up, Greenwood. But how do we have access to these and teach people about them, but then have relationships, and even having relationships with the national banks, Chase, Bank America, like, they have a lot of programs also. But it's just a matter of going in, sitting down, having the right representation, make sure we have our legal team, lawyers, have CPAs and stuff, and then having the access to these types of professionals, because we have those, but just having a community and having a directory and a network of these people. And so everybody isn't always out here doing it on their own. Even when you're going to buy a car and stuff. Like, one of the things my dad used to really do for us, and he still does for a lot of people, is he would go with them to buy cars and stuff. Because he's bought so many cars, he knows the tricks that they play, and just having somebody there who understands the game and stuff. Because a lot of times, like, when we go to buy a car, what we're looking for is, like, we don't care how much it costs, we don't care, like, does it run, and then what's the monthly payment? And we look at everything like a monthly payment, like, what can I afford out of my paycheck? And so how do we start to teach people, like, okay, start out with a hoopty, right. $2,000 car, something you can pay, or you ain't got to pay astronomical finance charges and stuff. But it's still, we just call it a take you, bring you car. Like, it'll take you to work and bring you back home. My first car was $200, bought off of Capitol Boulevard. I put it on layaway. I put $100 down. I went back after I got my first check, and I got it, but it was paid for, and just being able to just use the different ways of purchasing cars and not just always having to finance it. Because when you finance something, you're basically like throwing away your future earnings. Like, you're locked in for 5 to 6 years on paying on that. And a lot of times, we want dependable transportation so we can get to work. But also, we have to understand there's a cost associated with that, because you may can get something that can service you and allow that without having to, it be 40-50% of your take-home pay on a monthly basis.
And it's a strong distinction made between being poor and being broke. can you break that down for us in a way that helps people understand why the difference matters?
So for me, poor is more of a mindset, and it's a story that can sometimes become your story, and you hold on to that, you know, and you know, there's a lot of people out, you know, Christians and different religions and stuff, and a lot of times coming up in the 60s and 70s, it was looked upon as if, you know, the rich people are evil, and you know, the way to heaven is to be poor and to be humble and stuff. But you can help more people. You can help more of our people by having more assets and having more money and stuff. And so poor is more of a mindset where, you know, I don't want to get too rich because then I may not be able to get to heaven, or I may not be seen as a godly person or whatever. And broke is temporary. Like broke is like I tell people broke is a cash flow thing. Okay, I got bills due this week, but I don't get paid the next week. Okay, so I got to figure out how to overcome that, how to cover that this week until I can get my cash flow and I get my paycheck and stuff. So it's like broke is more of a math problem, and poor is more of a mindset problem. And so it's just being able to like really understand and starting to, you know, I'm always, you know, like I'm not a big religious person. I consider myself more spiritual. But one of the things we always just talk about in the church is don't be hung by the tongue. And so you can't keep telling yourself, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, because then it starts becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be able to figure out, like, how do I get out of this situation? You talk to people. You ask for help. That's why I write my books. Like, I'm not trying to make a lot of money out of these books. I'm trying to write the stories that I wish that somebody would have wrote for me when I was in my 30s and 40s and stuff, and help me, even in my 20s, help me to understand it. Because one of the things that we got in here is like this mistrust we have of the system. Me and Kip used to talk about this, and growing up, you know, we used to make fun of people checking the stock market. You know, look at him checking his stocks and stuff. I check my stocks every day now, you know. When we first got our job, 401ks started coming around in the mid 80s. Don't give them people your money; they trying to take your money, you know. And that was our ignorance, not understanding compound interest, which has been touted as one of the eighth wonders of the world, you know. And once you really start to understand how money works, how the economic system works, I was in the dentist's office a couple weeks ago, and this lady was talking about how high gas was. But she had taken a trip to Maryland, and she had taken a trip to Florida. And like I said, well, you know, is gas really that high? Like a gallon of gas is about the same as a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Mm-hmm. I said, so when you look at it like that, and so and I told my mama this. I said, Ma, you've been telling me gas was high my entire life. And like, yeah, there's a cost to it, but you have to look at that across your whole budget and stuff, you know, and because most people pay less for gas a month than they do for their food, you know. And so these are the stories that the media tells you, so they can get a reaction out of you, and you have to create your own money story. Like, what's important to me? Okay, I know I'm gonna drive my car because I got to go to work, got to take my kids to football practice and to their events and stuff. And so we spend so much time talking about it, but then what's the other things in your budget that you're blowing money on? You know, alcohol, weed, Jordans, you know. We'll go out and spend $200 on Jordans like it ain't nothing. That's gas for a whole month for some people, you know. And so it's really being able to associate and assign the proper value to these things, and don't let outside influences tell you, you know, okay, travel is going to be high, but you go to the malls, you go to the airport, everybody's traveling. You know, on Memorial Day weekend, everybody was on the roads. And so it's these stories we keep hearing, and they keep feeding us, and they want to keep us talking about these things and keeping us off the important stuff, you know. So
I have a quick question, Dwayne, because, you know, talking about the broke mindset and the poor mindset. So we're dealing with consciousness. So how do we raise our consciousness and change our mindset? Well, help to transfer. I ain't gonna say change. Help to transform our mindset to high levels of consciousness when it comes to finances.
So look at this. So I go to work tomorrow. You know, I got a team of people, and we'll engage and we'll talk about the San Antonio Spurs and the New York Knicks. You know, I got three brothers. we'll get together, and the first thing we'll start talking about is Jordan versus LeBron, you know. And so we need to start just having these conversations on a daily basis. Like, don't wait, you know, for a podcast or a radio show like this and talk about it once. Like, it has to be part of our consciousness on a daily life. Like, for me, like, here's the three things I focus on a daily basis. My relationship with my wife, my health, and with my health, that means what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? You know, what kind of exercise am I going to get in that day? You know, and you know what? I track all of these things, you know. And then it's the same thing with my money. You know, what is the market doing? You know, what is my bank account? What bills are due this week? And, you know, and so none of these things are surprising me. And it's getting into the daily habits of checking these things. And it ain't that you're trying to see, like, you know, like you're fixated on them. But where your attention goes, your energy flows. And if all you spend your time on talking about what I'm gonna watch on Netflix, what I'm gonna watch on TV, what time the games start, like, you know, it's the same thing with consciousness and spirituality. You have to make time to meditate. You have to make time to study the word, whatever word that may be for you, you know. And you can't just hope that it happens and hope that it happens through osmosis, but you got to, like, plan the time to really do that. And so I really try to take the time every week. Like, once a week I go through, I look at all my checkbook, what bills are clear. You know, sometimes there's surprises, like, okay, coming up, okay, yeah, you know, you got to pay your car insurance and stuff, and, like, you got your property taxes coming up. But if you, after a while, you know it's coming up in September, you got to start planning for that. And it can't be a surprise, and I got this big bill and stuff. So you really have to start putting on paper. And that's why one of the things I didn't have last time I came on this show was a workbook. And so now I've created a workbook because a lot of times people aren't as computer savvy. And so I got pen and paper is still the most powerful thing that you can have.
Yes.
Put it down on paper, whatever it is you're doing in life, put it on paper.
Yes.
Write it down. There's power in the transfer from your mind to a piece of paper through pen or pencil on paper. And then go back to that and look at that and really, you know, it's like even planning your life, like writing down goals, like where do I want to be in 3 months, 6 months, a year, and not just going through life, you know, and just riding the wave of whatever happens. Like, and sometimes you always have to course correct and stuff, but you got to have a starting point. And that's why I believe there's power in, like, really writing stuff down and to improve your lot in life, no matter what it may be, you know, football, basketball, your spiritual life, your marriage. Like, put it on paper, and then how do you dig in and peel back the onion? And also reach out to people, you know, reach out to people like us and stuff who are trying to help people. Like I said, I'm not doing this for money. Like, I'm trying to help our people. You know, I'm doing it. I started doing it, you know, for my grandkids. I got 2 grandboys graduating in 2 weeks, you know, graduating high school. Okay. And I don't want them to go out into the world. Like, when at 18, and you can ask my brother, I was sitting down there at the corner of Burgundy Street on the little stoop, you know, asking people for money as they come by so I can go up to the block and do my little thing and stuff. And like I had no plan. I had no purpose and stuff. But once I started working, and then once I started studying money and stuff, then that ignited a fire in me. And that's kind of like where my motivation comes from, because it wasn't nothing that my parents didn't do. They did the best that they could. I have a manuscript I'm working on now. It's called Wealth Denied, Wealth Restored. And it's talking about the things that we've talked about, the redlining, the GI bills, why we're still fighting for reparations, how we've been set back because of this system that was put in place to hold us back. Even right here in North Carolina, understanding the anniversary of the Tulsa bombings was a couple of days ago. Right. Understanding what happened in Durham on Black Wall Street, understanding what happened in Wilmington. And, like, if you don't learn and understand your history, then it will continue to repeat itself. And so we have to understand what happened, why it happened, and then how do we learn from that, and how do we move this ball forward and stop continuing and get off of this treadmill of this same just continually being downtrodden and stuff. But how do we help it? Because we got some smart people at this table. Like we have the know-how and the wherewithal. We just got to get organized and stop being pulled apart and going in so many different directions. So,
if I may, right quick, I study a lot of African spirituality and traditions, and in the Nguzo Saba, it states about Ujamaa, right? Cooperative economics, doing things basically as a community. And Dwayne, I just think that basically everything you're saying as far as, your advice in changing the poverty mindset, the poor mindset, or the broke mindset is something that really has to be shared, where we go deep into our community, and really start to, educate and help those who need it the most, basically those who are very much impoverished. And I just think that when we're talking about Ujamaa and cooperative economics, it's things that we can do as a group, right? Because I think that's the key for us to advance and to gain power as a people, economic power, which is one of the things basically that'll lead to our liberation. And you made a key point when you talked about reparations, right? Because we're also talking about not only, what's owed to us, but the lost wages, the lost opportunities, basically, and where we could be now if the atrocities that happened to us wouldn't have happened. So I think that is very important for us, those with the knowledge and dealing with economics, to reach back like what you're doing, Dwayne. Go in our community, start having workshops, seminars. You have a workbook so that we can work with our brothers and sisters and our families and educate our children on the importance of not only economics, but economic power.
Mm-hmm. Can I also say that it sounds like, our brothers are talking about what it means to do conditioning for us, because working out economically, like anything else, you have to work the mind to get there and to dismantle old ways of thinking. Or, we talk about these injustices that have happened in our community. Sometimes we get stuck there. Like we start developing like a sub-economic system for ourselves because of the injustices. And that becomes the social norm. So now we have to break that cycle so that we can go back to where we should have been from the beginning. When we talk about Wilmington in 1898, we have to recognize that blacks represented 60% of the population. And they said that our literacy rate was even higher than even the white counterparts. Like, we were thriving. We walked out the door, we started building our own schools and our banks, and we were going full-fledged. And the injustice that we suffered was so harsh until now we're down to like one black bank or, a self-help bank and a mechanics and farmers bank. But, now we have to re-up our mental just to get back where we were when we were thriving. I think what's also important is that, like Brother Asar said, how important it is for us to begin to teach these things back. But we also have to protect what we've already established, because what tends to happen is they burn us out, and then it takes us another 100 years to rebuild what we have. That's and so you'll have a population of children who won't even have that connection to know. When we talk about generations, they won't even know that we were that strong. We actually fought. We bore arms the quote-unquote right way, and we held our economic power. So now we have to redo it, and now share that again and include our youth. But they also need to know that you didn't wake up poor and broke. This was an economic dissension co-sponsored by your government. But thank you.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything you said, and we've been in Raleigh, forever, and we've seen like I go up to where Washington Terrace used to be, like that used to be a little thriving little strip right there. We'd go there, get our haircuts.
That's right.
There was a store on the corner, two stores on the corner.
That's right.
You needed something, we go there. Yes. Like we hardly ever went to the major grocery stores and stuff, you know, and there was always community stores that you can go to. And we need to get back to where we can have those and support those kind of businesses and stuff, and not always having to run, you know. And even if you just start out like the Black Farmers Market, and like we just really need to make sure people understand where these are, because a lot of times people just have a hard time just getting around. Like it's like now traffic is getting so bad, like people want to go for convenience and stuff, but how do we, you know, popularize these places and have relationships with these things, and so we can do more of that economic empowerment and stuff. And, you know, and even in some of the businesses and stuff, you know, where, you know, one of the things we're looking for at KCSSU is like we need a building. Like we need a place to convene so we can do more of this outreach, more of this seminars and webinars, and like really having our own spot where people can come and we can educate them and we can have these types of, you know, discussions with people and stuff. And we can't, you know, it can't just be a quarterly town hall.
That's right.
Like this needs to be
That's
something
right.
that needs to be happening every week and stuff.
Every
Yes.
day.
You know, and I don't want to you know, disrespect anybody's religion and stuff, but like, you know, we have so many churches right here in this community, and every Sunday they are packed to the gills and stuff. But then Monday through Saturday, they still go through and they still have these same challenges and stuff. And I've seen it for 60 something years and stuff. And like, so how do we, you know, because they're very organized. Like there's always funding, there's always a building fund, and like, but how do we start to help hold these accountable and stuff, and also help people like, you need to know where your money's going to and what it's being used for. And it's like I said, I'm not throwing any shade, but we have to be accountable. And one of the sad things I been reading this past weekend, following what's happening over at St. Aug, like we have to do better, and we have to be able to come together as a people. And if people are in need, how can we help them? But also we have to hold our leaders accountable as
That's
well,
right. Absolutely.
because we have poured money, thousands, millions of dollars into the community, into that organization and stuff, and then you have a few select people who choose not to do the right things with those resources.
And not having an open presentation as to where those funds have been distributed to, because you know the community. Again, I think, to say the least, these institutions belong to the people. They're just not colleges. They belong to the people so that our communities thrive. And we're not just sending our children abroad. They're a representation of them coming right here, homegrown. Those institutions are. So why would we not be more concerned about where the funding goes and how do we have sustainability, long-term and short-term? What is it, the connection to the community in our universities? I was born and raised at both Washington Terrace, Raleigh. We lived at F8 Booker Drive. We lived at the first apartment of Raleigh North. And we also, my grandmother was one of the main cooks. She was born in 1903 at St. Augustine College. And when the children couldn't afford to have room and board, they would come to our house. So it was nothing for us to come home and see a student staying with us, right, because we were community. And so she would bring a struggling student to the house, and we moved over and we made accommodations. Again, I think we're losing the sensitivity of how much of the price that have been made to build these institutions, and we've taken a lot of what we have for granted. Right. And because of it, we just think it's going to sustain itself. I think we stopped being competitive. I think even with HBCUs, we think just because it's black, it's supposed to thrive and survive. But just thriving is not being competitive. And we lose the luster, and I don't want to get on a tangent on these institutions, but I now give this.
But you're right, because we look at these institutions as higher learning.
Right.
You know, we look at them as the gold standard.
Uh-huh.
They're supposed to be setting the mark. They're supposed to be setting the course. Right. And if we can't depend on them to do the right thing.
That is correct.
And we're preaching education to our youth.
That is correct.
How important and how it is. But then you have administrators that don't do the right thing, and that's where I struggle with.
Yes.
And that's where because we've been fighting this fight for a long time,
It's true.
and we've come so far, but then we take 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back and stuff. So it's like that with the banks. With the predatory lending, like how do we help educate our people? And so we also know the questions to ask. Like even when in the communities and stuff, like how do we make sure that people have access to benefits for the veterans, for
That's
the
right.
elderly and stuff.
That's right.
And we depend on people to do it themselves, and it's hard.
It's true.
Like there's so much language in contracts and like even signing up for Social Security. like you have to have a master's degree just to be able to get through all that. There's part A, part B, part C. You got to do it 3 months before you turn 60.
That's right.
Like we have to help educate our people on all this and stuff, because if not, then that's how they get taken advantage of. And then they also don't get all the benefits that they're owed to and that they paid into throughout their life and stuff. And so that's why I write my books. That's why I come on this podcast. But there needs to be more. I know that. Right. Having a platform like this, having a platform like KCSSU,
Yes.
and having the town halls and stuff is a start. But we have, and we've been talking about this, but we have to start to gain a little bit more traction.
Right.
And start to get a little bit more involved and just get the word out there and be able to help.
Let me ask you something, Brother Dwayne. How much of it, because I hear when you talk about the lack of knowledge as being one of our biggest killers.
Yeah.
But how much of it is also, when we talk about the injustices, is actually criminal? Because when you deliberately create systems that block access, and most people don't understand sometimes even how their local cities are run. But for the most part, if you're a taxpayer, you quote unquote you have access to what they have, the police department, the fire department, those kinds of things, because your taxes through ownership, and correct me if I'm wrong, is actually how the city functions, the municipalities functions off the taxes of taxpayers. Yes, they get federal funding here and hither and thither, but they too have to file for grants and what have you. And so you'll see, like I think we talked about this, Brother Asar, at the CAC meeting, why so many of your taxpaying citizens came out to argue these points about the children, is because they felt like they were taxpayers and they should have had first rights to have an opinion about what should have been done, whether they call the police, the city council, all of these things that you see that they're entitled to. But the other side is how much of it has been, quote unquote, the system blocking us from having access to being a law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. So they sort of keep us in a place where you're not welcome in that genre of life, and then we have all rights to kill, maim, probably make up narratives that are not true. How much of it is criminal when we have systems that deliberately block us from entering?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. I think that's why it's so important to have social warrior justice like yourself and Brother Asar. You guys just being able to be represented at that meeting, and then doing some research after that meeting just to understand like what the legal rights are.
Yes.
Doing a lot of research on that and stuff.
Yes.
The transparency, being able to show, and that like a lot of this stuff is boring.
Yes.
It's not exciting.
Right.
It's not, but we have to start looking at, okay, what is the budget for Wake County? Mm-hmm. What is the budget for Raleigh? Mm-hmm. Where are the funds being spent? Like, so people can understand, because what happens, like we pay property taxes,
Yes.
we pay sales taxes, and we don't ever look at it again. Like we don't hold the city councilman accountable at all. We just say, hey, we just paying into the system. They're going to do what they're going to do. But we have to have our own way of, like, as boring as it may be, pulling that data, and understanding the rights that we have and stuff. And so we have to get more educated on the legal system.
I agree.
We have to start looking at this and holding them accountable and having discussions about this, and also having the proper representation, because a lot of times at those meetings, even though we elected the officials, it's kind of like us versus them.
It is.
They choose sides, and realistically, they have a job, and so they're protecting their job and their family first of all.
That is correct.
Even our politicians in Washington, they may say they're for the people. Nah, they for themselves. Like that's the reality of it. And so we have to understand the environment we're in, understand the injustices, and understanding the rules they play by, and then we have to educate ourselves on those, and then we have to have the right type of system where we can circulate this type of information so people can know. Because the more you're equipped before you go into those types of meetings or before you face these types of things, then the better you're able to respond, because you know your rights.
Sure.
And then if you don't know your rights and stuff, then you're kind of like in a victim mode, and like you're just defending yourself, and you can't go on the offensive. And so we have to, as like I said, as boring as it may be, we got to start to understand, like, okay, where's our money being spent? How is it being spent? What's, what monies are set aside for the communities and stuff, and even for the programs, the summer programs for the kids and whatnot, and for education and stuff. For teachers to still have to go out and buy supplies in this country. Like, hey, man, that's a crime.
That's a crime.
That is a crime and stuff. And so, how do we, and you unpacked a lot there just with the injustices, and they are there. And but how do we combat those, and how do we come up with the best strategies to help people to understand, like, okay, like, either you're in the jungle, you're in the city, you're in the ocean.
Find yourself.
How do you combat,
right?
What you're going to be faced and stuff. So.
That's good.
If I may, in response to what you said as far as the follow-up from that meeting, Dwayne, we'd like to thank you for doing the research as far as the federal law when it comes to protecting families in low-income houses or subsidized housing or Section 8. So we do have, everything that you pulled up. And a lot of times, the residents don't even know their rights. And, that's why I'm glad that we had the whole video from that meeting.
Yes.
And if you go through that video, you can see where rights were being violated, not only by the residents, but also the children. Right, because they are protected by law when it comes to juvenile confidentiality.
That's right.
Right, and a lot of those things were violated at this meeting, and that's why I kind of responded the way I responded. That all of these agencies would get together for elementary age children and criminalize them. And we're already familiar with the school to prison pipeline, which basically is another form of capitalism, and criminalizing, the poor. And also, when you look at criminalize what would be considered the uneducated, because a lot of the young brothers basically have dropped out of school because they don't find no interest in school one way or another. That's why it's so important for us to be able to educate our youth with the proper knowledge, the knowledge of self, right? So that they can hang in there in school and graduate, right? And so that they can have a secure future when it comes to opportunities for jobs and things of that nature, right? That's one of the biggest things that we have to address, and that is the Department of Education, these school systems, and how they intentionally target our babies to enter into some type of probation or some type of punishment that's going to really kind of, mess with them from a psychological perspective. Right, when you get to start labeling children and making them think that something is wrong with them. So we have to fight that with everything we have, because that's a part of the propaganda that's used in the capitalistic system. So a lot of times we got to understand the difference between capitalism and communalism, right? And I think as African people, when we talk about Ujamaa and cooperative economics, that way we'll be able to protect ourselves, make sure that our children aren't being attacked in the school system, by the court system, and put in protection of them so that we can grow spiritually, mentally, physically, and economically.
I think we also, like you said, Brother Sar, education is very important. I'm almost scared of how far we've drifted when we talk about where we are economically. Can we thrive in any system? Yes, we can. But do our children even understand that they're still not really in a capitalistic system, but it was built off imperialism and colonialism? And so, for the most part, we allow our children to start a narrative at G, H, and I versus helping them understand that they're in A, B, and C. And so we're so busy trying to make them be successful. And then when the hiccup come from a system, we're all thrown off guard. Well, don't you know the foundations that were laid? And so it's almost like, I always say that we're captive. We're a captive audience because we're a captured audience. Right. So we never go back to deal with the bars. It's almost like being in a prison where you actually do really well. You do really good in the system. Right. And we thrive anywhere we are, anywhere. And they've actually gave us a term called resilient. So it doesn't matter where we are, we always thrive. Yeah. But do we actually go back and say, yes, I know how to thrive. Yes, I know how to survive. But this format is incorrect. And our children, and that's where you start seeing the real missing links between how we interact, even amongst our own selves. We can be in the neighborhoods, communities, Southeast Raleigh, where we're all collectively put together and with 1,000 degrees and student loans, and we are capitalizing off of what America calls success. But there's missing links that are just so foundational, you can't help but miss it.
Yeah, so we absolutely have to redefine what success looks like.
Yes.
That's right. You know, you and Kevin made two great points, and I think one of the things we have to do, and this is where the mindset comes in, and trust me, I love to have a good time. I do, you know, but I also lead a boring life, you know, because I understand that there's a cost associated with it.
Yes.
And so we will come together over the next couple of months in the summer, and we will come together for activities involving music or partying or whatever. But we need to start having it, like, for you guys to be able to attend that meeting a few weeks ago was monumental, because you guys were there holding that leadership accountable.
Yes.
But we have to have this same type of representation at PTA meetings.
That's right.
Like, we have to get people, and it's boring, and it's, you know, but at city council meetings, like we have to start attending these types of meetings, you know, not only to show support, but also to help hold the leadership accountable and stuff. And we will do that on the things that we pick and choose, but we also have to do it on the things that aren't as sexy and aren't as entertaining and stuff. And like I said, this hard work, the work you guys do on a daily basis, because I know you guys are in it every day, and it's not easy. And it's kind of like, you know, pushing a boulder up a hill, but we have to start where we are, and like each one, and like, you know, even if it's like, okay, hey, PTA meeting, all right, students will come, or parents will come and pick you guys up on the bus and get you all there. But like, we have to start helping support our kids at an early age. That's and right. Not just leave it to the system, you know, because we know the deck is stacked against them. And if they see that parents aren't, you know, willing participants in their kids' education and learning, then those are the kids that they will target and go after. And, you know, and we can't have that. And so, you know, people may be saying, like, what does this have to do with financial literacy and stuff? Like, because it starts at home. It starts with the children. It starts with the kids. Understanding what kind of society we live in. We live in a capitalist society, but we see it as a consumerism society because that's what we focus on is how do we consume more? How do I get more? I mean, if you go right around the city and look at all the storage units, it's just full of junk that people have consumed and no longer can store in their house, and then they paying outside storage just for that. If you roll up most people's garages in this country, it's full of just stuff that they've just consumed. Our landfills are being overrun, and we have to get in like Dr. Kim said, we have to redefine that success isn't about the stuff.
It's true.
It's about you as a person. How are you helping your family? How are you helping your community? How are you helping your people? And not just what you can accumulate and stack up. And then it's not going with you, when you leave this earth.
So true.
So how do we redefine that? And I know it's hard because we've been conditioned, we've been programmed. And it's kind of like, how do we unprogram and how do we uncondition people and just slow down a little bit.
That's exactly right.
And enjoy the life, enjoy the company of people, and not always have to put on a big show, spending money, popping bottles, buying sneakers and stuff. And I know it's hard. Like, all of us like nice things, but do those nice things make you happy? Do they help you sleep at night?
That's
When
right.
your head hit the pillow, what's keeping you up? And those are the things, and that's where know thyself comes in.
Yes.
Like, who are you without
Yes.
all the stuff,
Uh-oh.
all the titles and all the things?
That's
Who are
good.
you at your being, your core being and stuff. And that's where we have to get to as a people and stuff. And, and all of us go through that. Like who, when people ask you, who are you? What do you do? Like, that's how we communicate with people when we first meet them. What do you do? And as if that somehow defines them, So how do we start having these conversations and just get away from this, success model, this European-centric success model, and
Right.
create our own, and that's like just knowing who you are, where you come from, and just digging deeper in how you being a good person and helping society and your community.
If I may, because I like when you
Good.
said, take it slow, one step at a time. Increments is really important. I ran across something the other day when I was studying, and they was talking about educators and teachers, how their job isn't to bring the next person to the level where they are, but to take them to the next level where they are. Like if they're in the second grade, the teacher's position and job is to prepare the student for the third grade, not the eighth or the ninth grade. And I think that goes with everything basically that we're talking about when we're talking about finances, when we're talking about spiritual development, when we're talking about anything in our community and advancing, understanding where we are mentally, spiritually, because of the condition and where we had to go. And I think that, like I said, the key thing you said was take it slow.
That's good.
One step at a time and bringing light to our brothers and sisters. And another thing you said I think that was important was making it enjoyable, because it can be enjoyable to learn. It can even be enjoyable at meetings, that we might not think are all that interesting. But that's why, one of the things basically in our books, our literature, the book of Patah Hotep, when he's talking about hearing, he or she who loves to hear becomes a master hearing. Nothing is better than hearing. So it's important for us to go to these meetings and really pay attention to what's being said. Like, and then, and what we did with the meeting we went to a couple of weeks ago, we went and got the whole video and listened to it again. And then
Yes.
you're really able to see the direction and basically what it is that wherever we're at, the city meeting or county meeting, what are their plans? Just like when you was talking about Wake County, going to the school meetings, the board meetings, and the city council meetings. It's also important for us to tap into city planning. What exactly is the city planning? And I think that's one of the things that we need to look at in the area of Raleigh Millbank, because the CAC has a direct relationship with the city council where they advise them and make recommendations. That's why the CAC is set up, Citizens Advisory Council. And they advise the city council, and they have a direct relationship with the police department, and that's why they're able to organize and plan on how can we get these residents out of these apartments and gentrify them. And I think it's important for us to continue to attend those meetings, invite some of the residents from that community so we can go to that meeting and ask politely, why are y'all trying to criminalize our children, our parents, and our whole community?
One thing that the average person is doing is trying to they looking for they sending their children to these institutions for like babysitting most of the latter times because they got to go out and work and they trying to make finances. So y'all talk about changing the barbershop talk. So what's one of the first conversations that a family should have that want to change their financial direction?
That's good.
That's it right there. Like,
That's good.
like just sitting out with the family, like, hey, we are where we are, but we got to change.
That's right.
You know, like, and there are so many examples in the city. You know, like all of us are products of the city and stuff. And like, you don't have to stay where you are. You don't have to stay poor. You don't have to stay broke. Like, you don't have to stay nothing. Like, we used to growing up, we said the only thing you got to do is stay is black.
Which is a good thing.
That's right. So
But we got to get further than that, right, brother?
yeah, but so and that's where I talked about earlier. Right now, goals. Like, even if it's like sit down. Like, we never had the only financial conversations, and I love my mother and parents to death, was we ain't got it. You know.
Or money don't grow on trees.
Money don't grow on trees, or Gimme got his neck broke. So, and that's but they
Those
did
are
the best
real.
they could because they were
That's
coming
real.
from parents who were sharecroppers and stuff.
That's true.
And then their parents were coming people from descendants of parents who had been enslaved and stuff. And so I understand that, but also there's a history there. Because they were self-sufficient in the communities and stuff. Like,
That's true.
my great-grandfather had land and stuff, and was taken from him. And so it's trying to go back. And one of the things I want to put in my next book is understand some of these histories that we have. But it's also sitting down with your kids, no matter what age they are,
That's
and
good.
start to teach them responsibly. So I've been giving my grandkids an allowance for probably the last 5 years. And then I wrote the book for them, the first book, Smart Money Moves. And trying to tell them, like, okay, you can't just buy video games. If you get $100 a month, save $10 a month in a little savings and build up. Don't spend everything you got. There's going to be a rainy day. So sit down with your family and stuff and just take a look. Like, hey, one of the things that you can really understand. Here's what our monthly, in business they call it overhead. Here's our monthly expenses. Our rent is $500, groceries is $500, $200. Like, know that number. That's one of the important things I try to teach people in financial literacy. Know your numbers. Like, know what is coming in every month and then know what's going out. And then you take the difference of that, and then that's your shortfall or that's your surplus. And then with your surplus, put a little bit in the emergency fund every month or pay a little bit more on a credit card bill and stuff. But sit down and write down all your finances on paper. Have a weekly budget meeting with your spouse. If your kids are old enough, you can start to include them. If you got giving them $10 a week, to let them know, like, hey, I'm going to start giving you this. Even if it's just $5, that's a good way to start to teach them how to handle money. Is to
good.
give them something to handle. They can't just learn through osmosis. Right. Give them $5 a week. Maybe $1. Maybe you create a little vision board or a little work board for them. Like, hey, every time you take out the trash, I'll give you $1. Every time you wash dishes, but those are the tools that the oppressors use. Like they taught their kids about this stuff. Start to teach them about, okay, we get life insurance. We have a basic will and stuff, but we got to start educating them so this nomenclature and these concepts aren't foreign to them when they go off to college.
It's true.
Teaching kids how to cook, how to wash their clothes and stuff, and just how to take care of themselves. And,
right.
Growing up, you see it as discipline or punishment. But no, if you can make your bed first thing every morning, you're off to a good start. If you can start your morning off with a glass of water, okay, I'm feeding my body. I'm feeding it pop. If you can do a little meditation every day. And so it's establishing good habits and stuff.
That's good.
But it's also having open, honest communication with your spouse on your finances, on where you are, and not hiding it from each other and stuff. And like really, really working on that, because
You gonna
marriage
get somebody.
is-
You gonna get somebody in trouble.
Marriage
Brother
is
Dwayne.
a partnership. Like one of the most important decisions you can make in your life is who you marry. And we don't know that because when we in our 20s and like that ain't what we choose, but it's a partner. Because if you choose somebody too much like you, that can be good if you're positive with your money, but if you're a spender and stuff, that cannot be so good. And so you need to find somebody who can help your yin and yang and help balance you out also, but also somebody who you can have these tough conversations with and stuff, and help you, to be your muse, because a lot of times you grow as a person by the people that's in your network.
That's
and
true.
your spouse is like right there with you.
That's
You
good.
know, and so it's even like this, like being around like-minded people and being around people who, and it ain't disassociating with people you grow up or your siblings or stuff, but you want to be around people who help you grow mentally and spiritually.
That's correct.
As a person.
That's right.
And like, hey, hey, at the end of the day, are you gonna feed my family? Well, no, dog, I got my own family. All right, well, I'm gonna do what I gotta do. Like, and this is my priority and stuff, because at the end of the day, ain't nobody gonna come in and help your family and feed your family. So you have to be that person for your house, and each household also treat it like it's a corporation.
That's good.
Like each household is a corporation, and you got to manage your finances, you got to manage your business, you got to keep the lights on, you got to keep the water running, and it ain't easy. But that's why we have to immerse ourselves in these what I call not so glamorous subjects and topics, and that's why it's great to have a platform like this so we can reach the masses and stuff.
Let me ask you this, Brother Dwayne, because you said well when you said you have to treat your family like a corporation. And I listened to, even though I laughed at some of the cliches that we say, like I don't have it and
Money don't grow.
money don't grow on trees. I remember those.
Those are my
cliches.
favorite ones.
Yes.
I thought money came from wood though.
Yeah, well,
Cotton.
paper definitely do something.
And cotton, right?
Yeah.
Cotton. Help me.
Not well. They say paper is made out of wood.
Is it made out of? Listen, I don't make it, so
Right.
I just work to get it. Well, my question is, because I came up in that era where my parents didn't share what they made. They didn't let you know what you just went like 18 years without really knowing. It was like you go to work, and then you learn on your own, and it was never sort of, and then they automatically felt like you should know how to take care of things without passing on those.
Yeah.
And when you talked about families being a corporation, I'm beginning to think like that more now. But I can remember having children was more about, now it's crazy because I also had my elders who before my generation worked large farms. And they had those children to pretty much work those large farms. Now we have children because it's emotional, and we was just happy for the moment, and no thought, no nothing. The children don't even work. They just on the couch playing video games and just space cadets, no purpose. And then you have a sect of parents who don't share what it means to be financially literate, or even share their finances to show the children why they don't have it or what we're working with. So we have a huge gap, Brother Dwayne. Help us come back to our centeredness, if that makes any
One
sense.
of the things we got to do is, and man, I can't imagine being 20 years old now. And that's why I got to work with my grandkids.
Yeah.
As fast as technology and AI is moving, and kids, you got 17, 18, 19-year-old kids deciding what they're going to do for the rest of their life in the next couple of months. It's graduation season.
That's right.
And those jobs may not even be there in 5 years when
It's
they
true.
graduate.
It's so true.
But you know what jobs will? Auto mechanics,
Yes.
plumbers,
Trade.
HVAC,
Yes.
electricians, trades.
That's right.
And so a lot of times kids choose something to study based on the excitement or the section or their parents push them towards it. But we also, like, even for us, and like, we got to get in the communities and start to teach these kids, like, there's options out there. Like, I started out, I went to Wake Tech. The first course of study for me at Wake Tech in 1980 was radio and television servicing. That's what I went to school for.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yep. And I didn't last long. And then I got start partying, but then I went into welding. But then finally I got into engineering and stuff. And then my final major that I got a degree in was business management, because I had been doing that for so long. I'm like, okay, so this makes more sense and stuff. But starting to teach kids and give kids options on what's going to be available. Like, kids are whizzes, even little 4 or 5-year-olds now with cell phones and stuff.
Right.
Yes.
So understand coding, computer, cyber security and stuff. But, like, how do we get these kids looking at different things, the
Enticing
trades and stuff, but then also having these, how do we get into the schools and start working with the counselors and stuff, and, like, understanding what the kids are looking for and asking for and stuff, because I think that's where a big disconnect is.
I agree.
Is, like, all this stuff is being taught to these kids in school. The counselors are steering them in a certain way and stuff, and then they come out 4 years from now, and then there ain't no jobs and stuff. And so, how do we create resources where the parents and the kids, and then also understanding, like, what's available at Wake Tech. Like, Wake Tech, when I started, Wake Tech was just down, on the way to Fuquay. Now they got Wake Tech campuses all over and stuff.
True.
Like, and how do we, even partner with trade with those kind of schools and help get kids into those programs and stuff.
That's true.
Get scholarships or whatever. But how do we help steer them towards these types of things and stuff? So, like, there's so much to do.
It's true.
And there's so much opportunity, but we need the vehicles, and that's why I write the books. I got to get my YouTube back going up where I can just get more of the message out there and stuff.
Yes.
But we have to get the message out there to the masses. We have to get more town halls, where we just talk about something like this, but then also giving people, to your point, Brother Essence, how do people start where they are, But also, like, one of the things I want to do is I want to teach people how to teach the stuff that I do. I want to mentor people to teach them how to manage their finances, because that's how we do it, by each one teach one.
That's true.
And then the more people, the more students we can have, and the best way to learn something is to teach it.
That's
and
right.
so if I can create courses, webinars, seminars where I can teach people, because I'm just one person. And then if we can start having, that's how people like, Dave Ramsey and Boyce Watkins, that's how they get their message out. Like, they aren't doing it all. Like, they teach other people how to do it, and then they become certified teachers and whatnot. And then that's how they continue to spread their message. Boyce Watkins, I love his work. Most of his work is talking about for the people who already got a little bit of money and for the people who are ready to invest. But how do we start at the ground level for people who may be in the situation where they have the poor mindset, or they're currently broke, or living the paycheck to paycheck, and how do we help those people start to climb out of that hole? And one of the and I use this analogy, the first thing to do is to stop digging. So if you're in the hole and the hole's getting deeper, first thing you gotta do is stop digging.
Yeah.
So, like, if you keep, you relying on credit card to survive, okay, how you get a part-time job, how you start selling some of that stuff you got in your storage units and stuff, but coming up with solutions to get out of the hole and start to move forward, start to get a little bit of traction.
One thing I'd like to say is I like to go back when we first started this podcast, Dwayne, and you was talking about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and how they had built their economy up with a Black Wall Street, and then it was destroyed. And you spoke about Durham, North Carolina, right? And basically what happened to the Haitian community.
Yeah.
And also Wilmington. And these, in 1898, this is important, right, when you go back to that. And I think that, we need to start researching and investigating what were our ancestors doing to make them so successful at such an early point of us being emancipated as a people. Because when I really think about it, I'm like, wow, we just became free as a people. Like yesterday. It hasn't been long whatsoever when you're talking about 161 years, but yet we were able to accomplish so much in a short period of time. And when they saw the potential of the black man and the black woman and the black child, they said, well, we have to do something to discourage them from using their intelligence and their skills to be able to build. Because they said if they continue to build like this, like in Rosewood and other parts of the country, and then they'll be able to build their financial stability, right? And I think that when we really look at that, okay, we know we have to put protection on each other, but yet we understand that there's an enemy out there that is so content on destroying any possibility for us whatsoever to create wealth for ourselves, our families, and our people, right? So I think that in our plan, when we're talking about economic development and understanding the enemy, I think we have to highlight what has happened in the past when we're talking about reparations, right? Because we can't leave out what we built up and what they intentionally destroyed. So we have to be able to do something where through our knowledge, right? Because that's the first line of protection, what we know. We know all of these things has happened to us. We understand that the United States, is one of the countries that voted against the transatlantic slave trade as being the gravest crime against humanity. So we take all that into our reality as we build our finances and understand that there are those out there who don't want to see us be successful. That's why I like what you said, Dwayne. We have to be able to define our own success.
It's true. And, Brother Star, that's powerful when you talk about, where we are and how we got there, restudying or revisiting that.
Right.
There is nothing more important, the fact that they know we can build.
Right.
The question becomes, how do we protect what we built?
Right.
Because everything that we had done from prior to, from 1865, emancipation, up until 1898 was burnt down in less than 3 days.
Right.
So how do we can do all the economics we want, but if we ain't got no water to put out the fire or, protection on our homes, how do we really, really protect what we have? And it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy that eventually we just start dumbing ourselves down, and we actually separate. Because one of the things that do those terror attacks or those lynch mobs, they basically said, if you're going to live under this government, you have to think for yourself. Because if you ever come together, we'll destroy you. So then you saw black people scatter, but they scattered into institutions and governments just to hide and be safe, and they were not allowed to no longer congregate. See, remember, during slavery, it was against the law for us to congregate.
Right.
We came out of slavery. We started building our own freedmen's villages. We started building our own banks, what have you. And they burnt us out so bad. It was so much terror that says if you come back into the fold, you cannot operate as a holistic community. You have to be separate and apart. And so now you have to integrate just to stay alive. So now we have to train ourselves to come back and even commingle and exchange with one another, because that was normal for us to exchange with each other. Now we don't have any of the economic stability or any of even the creativity. I was going to say that I went to school at Wake Tech, and one of the things that blew my mind is that the same curricula that is used at Wake Tech for criminal justice is the same one used at St. Aug. So when we talk about what defines us, what defines success for us, it cannot be the same textbook as what the system is using, as we're asking for our own demise. We're saying go to school. Do we hear ourselves? What kind of schooling are we getting? We have opportunity to go to school, but the program that they're giving to us requires that we participate in our own demise. So now we have to, like you said, stop or slow the train so that we can think long enough like this is not what we're supposed to be doing. That is a powerful statement, and we have to be okay with it, to say we don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And we're okay. You just leave us alone. We're going to build again, but we need like some a fireproof community. We need some real stuff that actually protects us.
Most people don't realize that's all we ask, just be left alone.
Left alone.
We'll build our own. Just don't come bother us.
Please don't burn it down. Please don't steal the
Yeah.
patent. Please don't.
But also to your point, like there's a lot of good things happening in the community.
Yes.
Like I know they just broke ground on the new place in Durham. There's affordable housing going up in Raleigh and stuff. But my thing is, are the potential customers and clients prepared for that? Because you can't. Because a lot of times when you get into home ownership, you own the home, but like there's a lot more that goes with it. Like the finance, like even like understand, like if you buy a $300,000 house and you get a 30-year loan, you're gonna pay $600,000.
That's right.
So are people saving up for emergencies and property taxes? Like we've lost so much land over the years because the kids who received, who were lucky enough to receive, this from parents or grandparents passing away, they didn't understand about the tax laws and stuff.
No.
And they refused to pay I ain't paying no property tax for property I already own, and then that's, so you have generations that fought hard to build something and then we lose it. And so, we're fighting a double-edged sword, we're fighting the system, but then we're also fighting, our own ignorance and not understanding the rules of engagement and
That's
stuff.
true.
And so, I keep saying that, like, that's why I write. Like, one of the things we haven't really talked about is, like, really understanding taxes. Getting a refund check in April, February, March, April ain't a bonus. Like, you paid that money.
That's right.
If you got some skills, set you up an LLC and learn how to take advantage of the system. And it's not getting over or cheating. It's the rules. It's how the system is structured.
That's right.
And that's how a lot of billionaires don't pay taxes. So
Right.
educating our people, like, being able to pay your kids if they're doing work for you within an LLC. But just really teaching the community about all these tools and resources that are available and not just depending on a 9-to-5. We talked last year and we talked at the previous podcast about how we were trying to get a little flea market going, but teaching people how to create their own businesses and stuff. Now with AI and stuff, like there's a lot of AI millionaires out there now. Like, how do we teach people like to tap into the talents and skills they got and to monetize them? And you may not make, $100,000, $1,000 or $1,000. Like, an extra $100 a month is good money. Then you build on that 200, then 300. Like we can all use a little bit extra. And so if you can start to like Kip said, like just start in increments and be able to generate additional money and wealth and resources to help your community and your family, like that's also what we need to do, because we have a lot of skills. We know how to spend, but how do we pool our talents together and stuff for the greater cause?
That's something you said right there. Skills, you use that word maybe 2 or 3 times right then. That's something that we're not understanding in ourselves anymore, what our skills are, because we sitting in these classrooms, we sitting in these buildings, the institutions, and they're not bringing out the skills that we have in us. They're just teaching us how to be workers or to fit in society. So how do we get back to I know y'all mentioned it before, the trades and all, but being self-service, welding, you mentioned, nursing, air pilots. I mean, it's plenty of things out there that we can be self-servicing in. So let me ask, what are some money habits that was passed down to us that passed down to us as survival tools that could be holding us back from wealth building now?
Trust, not trusting banks, not trusting credit unions, not trusting the stock market,
Not trusting each other.
Not trusting each other.
That's good.
You know, always looking for a deal when we interact with each other, when we spend with each other.
That's so true.
You know, give me a hookup, brother. I mean, like, you know. So, but
What about consumerism?
well, you know,
Just plain
Jordans. I mean, I love Jordan, but Jordan is he's built a $1 billion empire, and he does a lot of good work. I ain't gonna take that away from him, you know. And it's more Nike, but also like we're the cusp. Like we gotta stop being so enthralled with looking good and being like it. You know, I told you, I think I said this last time, but my grandboys asked me what was for show. And I said, you know, oh, this is, you know, looking good, but not being good, you know. And so we have to be able to, like, you know, wear the same old clothes and stuff, but, like, knowing, like, we ain't got, like, man, your neighbor, like, they may see you in a nice car and they see, oh, that's a nice car. But after that, they ain't thinking about you, you know, even with your clothes and how you dress. Like, oh, you know, so-and-so look good in her church Sunday dress, you know, but, like, instead of looking good, we got to start being good.
That's good.
You know, we got to start being able to, when our head hit the pillow, we have a peace of mind.
That's good.
And like, that's all we want. That's all we want is like when our head hit the pillow, we ain't got all this stress and anxiety worrying about where the next meal gonna come. So we have to change some of our habits and our behaviors. And I always say, like, that's the main thing is like, what do you do on a daily basis? You know, people used to talk about in the business world, you know, they had an attitude. Well, all of us have an attitude. You know, it's not attitudes. It's how are they behaving? Because your behavior is what you can quantify.
Right.
You know, are they behaving in congruency with how we should be, or are they behaving in a negative manner, which is destroying our community, which is destroying the family? Yeah. And so it's how we behave, and how do we start working on these mindset things and start where we are and trying to help people establish better money habits. And like I said, man, start with $1. If I can put $1 away every week, and then, okay, in July, I want to start saving $5 a week, and then $10 a week. Having these goals, writing these goals down, start to really track your money like it's a job, because it is a job. Mm-hmm. Because if you ain't tracking it, like, you know, what you don't measure doesn't improve. You know,
that's good.
If you want to lose weight, but you never weigh yourself, you know, like, and you got like, and you can, there's other ways of measuring it. Like there's more measures, right? Okay, my belt's getting a little bit bigger, or my pants are getting looser, my shirts are, but also, you know, measuring your money, your bank account, your savings, your goals. You know, I'm trying to save for vacation. I'm trying to save for a new car. So you have to put goals in place, and then you have to measure how you're progressing towards those things. Even like that's what they do in school.
That's
like
true.
with your GPA. Okay, you need this many credits. You know, by the time you get to your senior year, you know how many credits you need, and then you make sure you work towards that. So we got to also teach the community how to be more goal-oriented, how to want to move forward and get better, and you know, and it's even the same thing with educating yourself. You know, most people only started to learn about Tulsa and Wilmington in the last 10, 15 years. Like, how is that even possible? Like, we didn't hear about this stuff growing up.
That's
you
true.
know. And so what we have to do is we have to be a bullhorn and a loudspeaker and really talk about these things and bring them to the forefront and let people know. Like right here in North Carolina, Black Wall Street and Wilmington happened here. Mm-hmm. You know, places that we visited on the regular, you know, but also help them to understand like what happened in Wake County and Johnston County with the land being stolen from black farmers, you know, who you know, just got duped and tricked out of, you know, ownership by you know, not being able to read properly or not having a legal representation and signing deeds away. Like, we have to educate them on, like, even what's happening in Method. You know, they just created a big road right through the city of Method, you know, that crosses over the Beltline and stuff.
That's right.
You know, I was part of a little project I was working on with one of my brothers in Method and stuff, and I learned a lot of history just sitting there talking to some of the elders. My grandmother grew up in that, you know, she lived in that community, raised her kids in that community. But just understanding about O'Berry Kelly, that high school,
That's
you know,
right.
never knowing the history about that, and then to find out some of my uncles went to that school. what Dr. Kim just said about St. Aug and her grandmother working there and stuff. Both of my parents went to St. Aug. So understanding the history and learning that,
That's right.
And we used to go, to football games at Inlow when Shaw used to play, and we were there just to hear the band. Yeah. Just to hear the band.
Tell the truth.
And now understanding that was one of the first universities in the country.
That's right.
For African Americans and stuff. And so we have to start teaching this history. And we don't have to, it's good understanding the history of Kemet and Nigeria and Africa and stuff, but we have our own wealth of history right here that we can start teaching. Most people don't understand, I don't know if Dr. Kim went, but me and my brother went to ACOC.
Oh, no, sir.
Understanding who that institution was named after. And we used to be so proud by ACOC.
You better leave it alone, brother. And listen, I'm a historian. So if Brother Osar tell you that I probably lose it when you start talking about certain names in this city because they carry the legacy.
Yeah.
And we uphold those legacies. And our children are just funneled right through them without us, having any kind. And when you said Johnston County still in land, my great grandfather's first wife out of Method, he was out of Method, and they were out of Johnston County. He married a woman whose mother left land that the slave owner left her. And Johnston County was like, oh no, this black woman have all of these acres. Well, they kept pressuring her to sell, and she said no. It was given to us so that we could develop our, for maturing. That's what she would say, for maturing. But they didn't trick her with the deed. They basically lynched her. They kept saying, we want you to sell, and she said no. And one day the sheriff came and said, you have to vacate the premises. And she refused. And he brought his team, the deputy and somebody else. My great-grandmother went and got her shotgun and blew the sheriff away of Johnston County right through the front door. And what came back to support the town of Johnston County, or whomever, it was actually, I believe it was O'Neill Township. That's a part of Johnston County because they did townships. They came back and they drug her out the house and they murdered her. And a child found her in a ditch face down. And they said a wooden stake was driven through her heart. And the way they knew who she was is because she had just shot the sheriff. And they put it in the newspaper. They didn't find her body till 71 days later after the incident. And I have that article. But what I would say is that a lot of times we don't even address the criminal things that this country has done. And so we start adopting terms that don't belong to us, such as affordable housing. Right. We celebrating affordable housing. Yeah. But we've been here 400 years. Why would we need to have affordable anything? Where's what you owe us at? Give us what you owe, and that's reparations. And give us our dignity back of all the things that we have built. That's why it's so important. They hold on to their legacy and names and buildings and what have you, and they will not let you diminish it. We're the only ones who have to start over. And then they give us new tag names to go with it. And that in itself is an insult and a disrespect, that we don't hold on to our own history, nor do we hold them accountable for the wealth that we've already built.
And that's why programs like this, like the event we're going to have next Sunday on reparations, like
come out, y'all.
Like we have to. And I know a lot of times people just, can't y'all just let it go and move on? No. We can't. No, we cannot. We have a responsibility to the ancestors that have come before us to keep this fight up.
Yes.
That's our legacy.
That's right.
And, and I talked about this, like, we may not be here when the reparations are finally paid, but we're going to make sure that we continue to fight the fight. And even if we have to pass on the torch to the next generation, but there's an IOU out there.
That's right.
And we want our money.
That is correct.
And people look at us and they will say, well, y'all weren't actual slaves. No, we are legacy,
That's right.
of what has happened to our people, and the atrocities such as Dr. Kim just spoke about. But it's happened, and that's just one. Like, that's happened throughout time in this country, and somebody needs to be held accountable.
That's right.
And people may say, it's time to let it go, but no, it's not. Like we won't, and we will keep up the fight.
Absolutely.
And stuff. And we want to educate people on, and not just give them the typical talking points, the 40 acres and the mule and stuff, but we want to really dig deep and explain to them and teach and educate people on why we're picking up this fight and why we'll continue to fight for reparations.
Yes.
Yeah, for people.
Yes. I think it's important, speaking on reparations, and the event, Reclaiming Our Legacy, is next Sunday at John Chavis Memorial Park, 505 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27601, from 2 p.m. To 6 p.m. Please come and join us. I think that this fight for reparations is real because, for one, the United States, they don't want to acknowledge the transatlantic slave trade as being the gravest crime against humanity. So I think it's important that we understand where we are in the belly of the beast here in the United States, and we have to fight for justice.
That's right.
There can be no justice where there's injustice. There's injustice still going on today.
That's right.
When it comes to racial relationships, when you're talking about systemic and institutional racism, you're talking about white supremacy, you're talking about policies and laws that are intended to not only criminalize us, but keep us impoverished as a people. So reparations isn't just dealing with the atrocities that happened in the past. It's also dealing with what's going on today.
That's right.
And what they want to go on in the future. That's why it's so important that we do the work that we do, standing on the shoulders of our ancestors who came before us, fighting the same fight that we're fighting. And we have to be able to educate our youth, pass the baton to them so that we can win this fight. We've already won it being submitted. It was submitted to the United Nations by Ghana, and it was approved, right? 123 countries voted in favor. So we have the world with us, but we have those against us as well who don't want to acknowledge their role in the transatlantic slave trade, like the United States, Israel, and the 27 European countries who abstained from voting. So here we're dealing with a mindset of our and Argentina ain't important. Here we're dealing with a mindset, right? A European mindset that's intent on domination, control, and power. So it's important to us to understand that when we're talking about economics, economic power leads to political power, right? And we have to have political power not only because we can't get it but so much in this country, but from a global perspective. That's why the Pan-African approach is so important when we all stick together. That's why when we read Memorandum 46, right? Memorandum 46 teaches us how the United States intentionally tries to keep us separated from our brothers and sisters, not only in Africa, but throughout the diaspora.
That's
right.
right.
That's why this reparations, the decade of reparations as declared by the African Union from 2026 to 2036 is so important because a lot of reparations is dealing with compensation, but it's dealing with a lot more than that.
It is.
Like returning our artifacts, right? Stopping the oppression, stopping the imperialism, the colonization, putting a stop to everything basically that they've been doing to keep their foot on our neck. So it's not just avenging our ancestors, and it's not just for us today, but it's to make sure that we lay a foundation of Maya, truth, justice, and righteousness for our future generations, and also for us to attain the global power that it's going to take for us to make sure that the atrocities that has happened to us never happen again. Because when the Jews say never again, and they mean it,
That's right.
everybody applauds them,
Wow.
right? But when we say it, they want to look at it a different type of way. But we need to look at it a different type of way. Just like when they talk about anti-Semitism, whenever they say anything negative about black people, it need to be anti-blackism or anti-Africanism.
That's right. And let me say this, Brother Kevin, you're on point there when we start talking about protecting ourselves.
Right.
The state of North Carolina has a law that basically says that our middle school and high schoolers have to be taught what the Jewish Holocaust was all about. But no one has to understand what has happened to the black communities across the nation, in our state, in our local cities. So our atrocities continue, which means we are still experiencing forms of the Holocaust. And like you said, they say never again, and they say never forget.
Right.
And just like Brother Dwayne was saying, they always say, well, why do you have to bring that up? Why do we keep, harping on the past? That's because we never got past the past. We're still living it out.
That's right.
And so this is our time. That's why reparations is not just about going back. It's stopping what's happening right now. Because those patterns of practices are still here. And I think when people hear reparations, they only equate it to the past. Well, we're still living it out, and we need it to stop. That is why SOS is calling for a freeze, so that we don't continue to pay into those atrocities. We can stop financially and mentally. We don't want to stop a system with our own mind and our efforts, but then we're still paying into a system that causes our demise.
If I can, before you move on, brother, I want to make a point about what I had stated earlier about what our ancestors were able to do coming out of slavery in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Wilmington, North Carolina, and Durham, North Carolina. It's not that we're not capable today, but it's like when the oppressors and the government saw our abilities, they made sure that they would put things in place that would prevent us from having that kind of building those type of communities. And I think that,
That's right.
just like the most honorable Elijah Muhammad said about integration, it was a trick. I think that was a way for them to pull us closer so that we couldn't build our own communities, because it's already been proven what we can do. But now, since it's integration, we're basically in their communities. We think sometimes if we move in their communities, we are basically moving up, and like moving on up, like, the Jeffersons and things of that. So I just wanted to make that point that it's not that we're not capable, but there are a lot of things being put in place to stop our progress, just like what's going on now with the redistricting,
Yes.
it Tennessee?
Yes,
Louisiana,
everywhere.
Texas, and other basically southern states that are done intentionally to basically stop us from getting any type of political power. So it's always a plan and a strategy to hold us back. We have to be honest with ourselves about that, right? Because are we full citizens? If we were full citizens, would it be institutional and systemic racism and discrimination against black people? So these are questions we have to honestly ask ourselves as we continue to build and develop our economic strategies so that we can get political power and get global power.
That's good. Are we asking for definition, or are we defining ourselves? And if we left it up to them to define us, then we've already been defeated. I think it's time for us to take the reins back. And like you said, any nation who fails to even take accountability for the atrocities that they've committed is not worthy for us to even be called citizens with. Maybe we're in love with the illusion of being citizens to America, but are we really? Right. And are we just sort of surviving very nicely, these accommodations that we have across? We have so much at our hands that it makes us sometimes forget our real reality.
It lulls us into complacency.
It is definitely. Right. And when we both talked about, all of us talked about Wilmington, how we thrived at one point.
Right.
And how we were self-sufficient. We depended on each other. We traded with each other because they wouldn't take our money anyway. We were separate, quote unquote. Now we're in amongst them, and we don't have anything to show for our own creativity.
Consumerism.
We're just consuming what it is that other people are making. And as long as we can just have it, it's a short thrill. So we have to go back to loving ourselves. And when we see each other, we love what we see, because it's definitely showing in the way that our economics is playing out.
June 7th, 2 p.m. at John Chavis Park.
Yes.
I understand that reparations or repairing is a little bit more than just monetary, but it takes finances to build a nation.
Yes.
And I also understand that. So I want to ask Brother Dwayne real quickly here. When people hear generation wealth, it could sound so distant or unrealistic. What does building generational wealth look like in practical terms, especially for first generation?
So I'll use this. I use this analogy. It's like a 4x4 relay. So where you're running around the track, everybody runs 100 yards, and right now.